Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Minneapolis. Maria Bartholdi in the booth, joined by Melissa DeTora, Fanchen Yang there on the left side of your screen, playing against Dan Ward, who is running white-blue approach. Fanchen on Sultai Reanimator. Both players currently sitting at 9-1. And Melissa, you told me before this round started that you've had a little experience playing around with this Reanimator deck.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So some of my favorite cards in Hour of Devastation are Strategic Planning and Champion of Wits. So a lot of my decks started out with 4 of each of those. And then it's just like try and do all the graveyard stuff, play Liliana, reanimate something crazy like a Razaketh, or what else can you reanimate these days?
I mean, you could reanimate a Gear Hulk, Noxious Gear Hulk. You could reanimate Ishkana, potentially.
So what is Fanchen reanimating? It looks like he's reanimating Noxious Gear Hulk, like you said. Demon of Dark Schemes.
Ooh, that seems like a good target.
Is that the demon that infests?
Demon of Dark Schemes. I was playing around with this deck last night after the GP. That's how much I liked it.
Oh yeah, this deck is super cool.
Demon of Dark Schemes is the one that gives everything -2/-2
Yep.
when it enters the battlefield. There you see a potential target. A Kalitas is going to have a little bit of an Ether Meltdown. I just love decks that come into a tournament and give us something completely unexpected. I mean, we're coming off the Pro Tour. We saw a lot of mono-red aggression, and now here we're looking at both of these decks, which are kind of slow, doing crazy things, sitting at only 1 loss. And speaking of strategic planning, Yang has fired off yet another one, which is a really key card in this deck because you get to sculpt your hand and put things into your graveyard to potentially reanimate.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the important cards in the matchup, because you don't want to draw cards like Razaketh in your hand. You don't really want to draw Demon of Dark Schemes. This deck has a lot of cards that are situational, like Yeheni's Expertise. Wow, he's playing the Scarab God.
The Scarab God.
Whoa, I didn't
Excellent.
expect to see that.
Another great target and just a card that does a lot of stuff that you want to do. Gets you to the ability to scry. It also brings things back from the graveyard if you need another way to do that. Of course, Liliana's Death's Majesty is really important for this deck too.
Yeah, for sure. And Liliana is also just a good card. You don't even need to use it to reanimate. It's like a card that can help stabilize the board. You can make zombies. You fill up your graveyard.
Meanwhile, Dan Ward is just kind of drawing some cards here.
Yeah, so one thing about Dan Ward's deck is it doesn't really do a whole lot. It plays a lot of 4-mana draw 2 card spells. It cycles a lot of stuff. It maybe kills things, and it just plays a turn 7 approach to the Second Sun. That's pretty much his game plan.
Yeah, he's cast 2 Glimmer of Genius so far this game, as well as a Hieroglyphic Illumination. We've got a Blessed Alliance here as well. Is Dan's deck interested in countering spells too?
Not really. He's playing he's playing Censor as his 1 counter spell. He has a bunch in the sideboard, but pretty much it looks like he built this deck as a metagame call to beat mono red and zombies and other aggressive decks.
Sure.
Seems like he's going to have a really hard time beating a deck that has counter spells.
And here we go, Liliana's Death's Majesty. Oh, it's going to get countered, in fact, by Dan there, but not before a Champion of Wits gets in for 2. And speaking of cards that have really made an enormous splash in Standard, Champion of Wits. How do you like this card, Melissa?
Champion of Wits is probably one of the most important cards in Standard. It just does everything. So, like, on the surface, it looks kind of weak. Like, you don't want to play a 3-mana 2/1. And having a Careful Study ability, like, that's kind of boring, right? But when you're playing a deck with graveyard synergy or situational cards that you don't always want in your hand, or you're just looking for certain pieces, this card can do a whole lot and also provide a chump blocker or just some value. And then turn 7 definitely happens. You're going to have 7 land, and just being able to just get a free creature out of your graveyard that doesn't cost you a card and also just draws you 4 cards is huge.
And here we see some value out of the Champion of Wits in a way that you might not expect. Noxious Gear Hulk from Yang killing his own Champion of Wits.
You know, I must be honest. I have done that before.
And how did it feel?
Sometimes you just want to kill your own Champion of Wits. It actually feels good, especially in matchups like this, because you don't want to attack with a 2/1.
No.
It doesn't do anything.
He's doing way more work in the graveyard.
But you want to attack with a 4/4.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Yang's graveyard full of good stuff. to bring back potentially if he can find another copy of Liliana.
One thing that's kind of sad about the removal spells that Dan is playing, if you're on Fanchen's side of the board, is they don't actually kill creatures. They just either give them -4, -0, or just remove them. But Fanchen really wants his stuff to actually die to removal spells so he can reanimate them.
All right, looks like we're taking a brief little judge call here in the match. Yang also, is he running Ever After in his deck?
Yes, absolutely. Ever After, that card is sweet. That card was designed by Hall of Famer Dave Humphreys.
Ooh.
It's like he really likes Reanimator cards. Like he used to play that on the Pro Tour a lot. And this card is 6 mana, reanimate 2 things. And it has the clause, put it on the bottom of your deck when it's resolved. So you can never deck yourself.
Awesome.
Just in case that would ever come up, you know.
So since you're a member of R&D and I've got you here, I might as well ask, you mentioned like this person made this card because it's what they like to do, it's what they played on the Pro Tour and that kind of thing. Do you find that people kind of gravitate towards creating things that are kind of in their identity as a Magic player?
Yeah, I do think that happens sometimes. Not all the time, but like there are some players who are Johnny players, like they're really into combos and that kind of thing, and they'll just make all of the combo cards, right? And like I said, Dave Humphreys, he lead designs a lot of sets, and sometimes you're just reading through one of his sets and you're like, oh yeah, this is a Dave Humphreys set.
That's so awesome. What would you say is your like niche in R&D?
So since I'm on play design, it's mostly competitive play. So I pretty much only design cards that are like going to make an impact in standard. Well, I wouldn't say only, that's not really fair, but definitely cards that will see competitive play and just cards that just look fun for like standard players, F&M players, stuff like that.
So we know that Dan is discussing Champion of Wits with the judge over there, discussing the interaction between the Eternalized mode and a removal spell.
Ooh, okay, so something interesting about that. So Grasp of Darkness gives -4, -4. And Champion of Wits says when this comes into play, draw cards equal to its power.
Right.
So if you Grasp of Darkness it in response when the trigger's on the stack, the player will draw 0 cards and discard 2 cards.
Brutal.
Whoa. But the other thing about Champion of Wits is it's a May ability, so the player doesn't have to draw the cards. So they can just, like, if the guy gets Grasp of Darkness, you can just choose,
I'm not
won't use the ability. I won't draw 0 cards and discard 2 cards. But if they don't know about that, they're like, oh, no. And then they just discard 2 cards.
Right.
I'm sure that has happened this weekend.
I remember learning about that interaction when we did our rules show.
Okay.
With our Judge Rob McKenzie, who's actually here working this tournament.
Yes.
And he did point that out. But it's kind of a difficult thing to remember. It's kind of a niche case.
Oh, and also about the rules question. So Dan isn't playing Grasp of Darkness, so I was like, why? I wonder what the rules interaction is.
Sure.
But he is playing Ether Meltdown, which gives -4, -0.
Right.
So that interaction will come up in this match.
Yep, that is exactly what they were talking about. Just getting confirmation from our spotters down there on the floor. It looks like Dan Ward has gotten an answer.
Okay.
So we'll sit back down and see where we're at. Dan still with a full grip of cards here. Only one in hand for Fanchen.
And the fact that Dan asked this judge question is pretty telling for Fanchen because it's pretty obvious what he's asking about. So maybe Fanchen is thinking about, oh, maybe if I Champion of Wits, he has the Ether Meltdown in hand. Maybe I shouldn't reanimate, or maybe I shouldn't Eternalize Champion of Wits.
Right. Dan is going to pass the turn back. It looks like Yang is holding an Ever After.
Does he have anything sweet in his graveyard? I can't really tell.
Well, he's going to start things off by getting in there with the Noxious Gear Hulk. I know there's Champion of Wits in there, but that card's just sweet in your graveyard to begin with. You don't really need to Ever After
Yeah, you
it.
don't want to reanimate that thing with a Liliana or an Ever After. You just want to Eternalize that. Okay, so here's the Eternalized Champion of Wits. Let's see if Dan responds with an Ether Meltdown. Looks like he didn't.
All right, well, Yang just going to draw 2, draws another Liliana's Death's Majesty's, got a Grasp of Darkness. Yep, oh, draw 4, discard 2.
Looks like a Demon of Dark Schemes. Is that what that is? No, maybe not.
Ever After is going to get pitched into the graveyard there.
Oh, no.
So
That card belongs in the bottom of the library. So with Fanchen tapped out, this gives Dan a chance to play his approach to the second sun.
Draft 46 players. If you have not
cycle
done so,
a
please
cast
come
out
to the
there.
gathering point now.
Draw
Draft
some more
46
cards.
players to the blue
How many
gathering
copies of
point.
Approach does Dan have in his deck?
He has 3.
Okay.
It's not very often that we see an alternate win condition in Magic, especially in Standard.
Oh, I love alternate win conditions. And here we go. Approach of the Second Sun is the first time it's cast here
Chaos
from
Draft
Dan Ward.
41. Chaos Draft 41. Please.
And he's going to go put it 7th from the top in his library, gaining 7 life.
Draft 41.
And Dan has so many draw spells and so many ways to filter through his deck, like Supreme Will, Hieroglyphic Illumination, a lot of cycling stuff. So he can really dig for that copy of Approach of the Second Sun.
Oath
Here's
of
an
Jace.
Oath of Jace.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see this card this weekend.
I wasn't expecting to see this deck this weekend, but as long as someone is playing this deck, I would expect to see Oath of Jace in this deck. It does dig through a lot of cards.
Yeah, Yeheni's expertise not going to do a lot versus Dan Ward.
Definitely not.
Here's Liliana, Death's Majesty, one of the hallmark cards here of the Reanimation deck. I love playing Reanimator in Cube, so that's why I'm so excited to see it in a format like Standard.
Yeah, Cube is a much different format, though. You have 1 mana reanimate.
It's a lot easier to reanimate things in Cube.
You have things like Careful Study and Tomb. This Reanimator deck requires some setup, that's for sure.
All right, Fumigate is going to deal here with Yang's board quite handily. Dan is going to gain some more life, and the clock is ticking for Yang.
Yeah, but a Fumigate does also put all the stuff in the graveyard.
That's true.
And with a Liliana on 6 loyalty, I'm sure we're going to see something get reanimated here. Oath of
There's a
Jace
scry.
does have another ability
Yes.
attached to it. He gets to scry every upkeep where for the equal number of planeswalkers he controls. So every upkeep he will scry 1.
And there you take a look at Liliana. Her -3 ability is the crucial one for this Reanimator deck. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Great art. Oh, I just love that card.
And it has an ultimate that destroys all non-zombie creatures, which probably isn't going to come up in this match. But I have definitely seen that ability be relevant, especially when you play Liliana, -3 to reanimate something sweet. They deal with it. You play a second copy of Liliana at some point in the game, pick it up a few times, and then you have a zombie in play.
Yeah, and that is Yang's going to get that zombie token. And eternalize that Champion of Wits.
One thing about eternalizing a Champion of Wits, so when you eternalize a Champion of Wits, that's like your 6th extra card draw, right?
Yeah.
So chances are you're going to have like Champion of Wits coming again and again because you
So
just
good.
keep drawing them over and over.
All right, strategic planning.
And he's already eternalized 2 of them.
Ooh, there's a demon going into Yang's hand. Yeah, at some point in this Reanimator deck, you can just cast your enormous spells.
Yeah, especially in this matchup where Dan isn't really doing a whole lot. But with Fanchen tapped out, Dan could very easily have another approach to the second sun here and just win the game. Let's see if he has it.
All right.
Supreme Will. That's got to be game, right?
There we go.
It is.
There it is. Dan Ward picks up the first game here versus Sultai Reanimator with his Approach of the Second Sun deck. You know, not only are these unusual because they're really creative, unique builds, but coming into this tournament, would you have said either of these decks were a good choice based on what we saw at the Pro Tour, which was nothing but aggressive reds smashing you in the face?
You know, to be honest, no. But I do have to say, like, the matchup of Dan's deck versus Mono Red does seem really favorable for Dan. And even the Reanimator deck has some game against aggro. It is pretty slow, though. Yeheni's expertise does help a lot, as well as Fatal Push and Grasp of Darkness.
Yeah, Yeheni's expertise, pretty brutal against any deck that's trying to win with small creatures, and that's why he has it in the main deck.
Yeah, absolutely. He has it in the main deck, and Yeheni's expertise into something like Oath of Jace or Champion of Wits, draw cards, discard some fatties, and then turn after that, play Liliana, reanimate that
Yeah,
fatty.
what are they going to do? I was playing a version of this deck last night, actually, and this morning.
Oh, wow.
I have a problem.
You're in love.
Yep. It's true love. And it had traversed the Uvenwald in it to help you go get what you need when you need it, because when you're putting a lot of things in your graveyard, you probably have Delirium.
Oh, actually, we saw a player yesterday play Sultai Reanimator, and I think it was a different player, and he did have Traverse the Uvenwald in his deck. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it was really interesting because it helps you find, enough black sources if you need something like that. Or later in the game, you can just go get whatever you need.
You can get Ishkana Graph Widow.
Yeah. Ishkana, back in a big way, potentially.
Yeah, we saw a lot of Ishkana a while ago, back when Eldritch Moon came out. That card was everywhere, but...
Yeah, Ishkana was pretty format-defining, I would say. There was a Grand Prix that I was working where they ran out of spider tokens. They just ran out everywhere in the entire venue. Nobody had any more spider tokens. That's how many Ishkanas were running around.
Yeah, Ishkana was a card that we played a ton of in our FFL. We added, at the very end, the black activated ability.
Right.
The reason why we did that is because we wanted to make it a cool choice for like a commander spider tribal deck. And adding that black activated ability gives it the color identity black, so you can play a black-green deck.
Oh, that's really cool. When you were testing in the Future League, you played some of this Reanimator deck as well?
I did.
How did you feel about it then?
I was in love.
So we're having similar feelings for this deck. Is it really kind of fun for you to come into a tournament like this and see what the players have stumbled upon after, you've been there, you've been in the trenches trying to figure this stuff out?
Yeah, definitely, especially the week after the Pro Tour, right? Like week one during the Pro Tour, it's really cool to see the players play decks that you've played over the last year. And if they don't play those decks and like you kind of like miss in your evaluation, then like the real world will just kind of adjust and just play different decks throughout that season. But for some Pro Tours, like I feel like we were pretty spot on in what we thought that what people would play and what would be strong.
How do you feel about this Pro Tour that we just got back from Hour of Devastation in Kyoto?
I can't say that I was surprised to see Mono Red up there at the top. I would have liked to see some diversity, but it is week one. People don't know what to play. Also, the format just got a huge change in the form of the banning of Marvel.
Right.
So, it was a little unpredictable, but Mono Red is a very safe choice when you don't know what's going on.
You're always going to be able to attack with creatures.
When in doubt, just smash.
I hear that. All right, we're kicking things off here in Game 2. In the match between Fanchen Yang, Sultai Reanimator versus Dan Ward's white-blue approach of the Second Sun deck. Champion of Wits on turn 3 here for Yang. Exactly what you want to be doing in this deck. Drawing a Liliana, also a pretty good thing to do. Oath of Jace was also one of the cards he drew. Deciding now which two to discard.
So looking at sideboards, it looks like Dan Ward doesn't have any reanimate or reanimate hate cards, like no Crook of Condemnation, no Graveyard Hate. What else can you play for Graveyard Hate these days?
Definitely Crook of Condemnation is the #1 card I would expect anybody to be packing for Graveyard Hate, specifically because people are trying to prepare for the God Pharaoh's Gift deck, but...
Yeah, I would expect Dan to bring in some negates. Hour of Revelation is a pretty interesting card. Oh, this is Descended Mindbender, right? The Emerge card.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah. So another thing about Champion of Wits, so good with Emerge.
Absolutely. Descended Mindbender normally costs 8. Emerge for 5 black for a 5/5. And now Dan Ward's just got to reveal his hand, and he can choose a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less, and a card with converted mana cost For a greater, make him discard those.
Yeah, this card is sick.
Wow,
It's
this
a-
is huge.
A
game.
5/5 for 4 mana, and pick 2 cards and take them.
I think I'll take Supreme Will and this Gear Hulk.
Yep, sounds good. Doesn't really make much sense to take one of the Approach of the Second Sons because he already has another copy of it. But taking Supreme Will here seems really strong because Dan needs that to filter through his deck. It does look like he does have more Supreme Wills in hand, like one other one I think I saw. Yep, there it is. So one thing about Descend of Mindbender is it's a cast trigger, so it doesn't need to resolve. The spell is still going to work. But after he does take the cards, he has the option of countering it if he wants, and he did choose to counter it there. One less 5/5 to deal with.
Oh, yeah. But that was brutal for Dan Ward. And here comes Liliana, who I think is probably going to reanimate that Descended Mindbender. You're not going to get the cast trigger, like you said, but still a 5/5.
Absolutely. Still a very reasonable threat, even though you aren't getting that cast trigger. But hey, that guy already did his job.
Yeah, he did. And in he comes for 5. Dan Ward dropping to 15. And I think Yang is going to pick Dan Ward's brain.
The brain. Does he have Delirium?
Well, let's take a look at what Dan's got going on in his hand. Fumigate, Descend upon the Sinful. Approach of the Second
Oh.
Son, and goodbye.
So you get all the copies, right? Or does he not have Delirium?
I'm not sure. I see creature, I see land. There is now a sorcery, but
Okay, well, he didn't search his deck, which means he didn't have Delirium.
okay.
But if he has another Pick the Brain at some point in the game with Delirium, then the game just ends. Dan Ward has no other win conditions.
Does he only side in one Torrential Gear Hulk?
He has 2. So I guess he does technically have another win condition.
There you take a look at Hour of Revelation, which is now sitting in Ward's graveyard. Able to destroy all permanents, non-land permanents.
Yep. Planar cleansing with upside.
Descend upon the Sinful there from Ward.
No Delirium from Ward, so he's not going to get an Angel token. Or he is going to get an Angel token.
Oh, looks like he does
Looks
have
like
it.
he does have Delirium.
But Grasp of Darkness will take care of that Angel token quickly. Liliana still in play for Yang. Is going to tick up to give him a zombie. Oath of Jace here to take a look at more cards.
Discard some removal spells and lands. Don't really need those here. So if Dan drops his 7th land here, he can cast that. Oh, no, I guess the Approach of Second Son is gone at this point, but... Oh, wow, Dan's going to have a really hard time winning this game.
He's got another one in hand. A cast out I see in there as well. Which player just kind of in a void do you think is favored in this matchup?
I think it's actually Dan, because he has enough ways to deal with creatures, and all he needs to do is buy time to cast those Approach of the Second Sons. Not knowing the deck list, I think you would assume that Fanchen doesn't have counter magic,
Right.
because his deck is just creature removal, draw spells, and things to reanimate. It's possible that he has negate or something after sideboard, but because his deck needs so many pieces, he doesn't really have a lot of room for too much counter magic.
Dan Ward just going to chip in for 2 points of damage here. Another Oath of Jace to take a look at some more cards. We had a Noxious Gear Hulk off the draw there. Kalitas in hand. Liliana making more zombie friends.
I didn't realize they were friends, but okay.
Oh, of Liliana? Oh, yeah. Those guys go to the movies, they hang out, they help her move.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Liliana's really lucky.
Yeah, if you got friends who'll help you move, they are true friends.
As long as she buys them pizza afterwards.
Oh, I mean, she's not a monster. She's just got a little bit of a demon pact. All right, well, Yang is trying to cruise to victory on the back of those two zombies right now. Let's add another one. And mill 2.
Another interesting thing about this matchup is if Dan has no more win conditions in his deck, he's probably still going to win because Fanchen is going to deck himself. I did say earlier about Ever After how if you're just casting that over and over, you're never going to deck yourself. But if Dan is able to find a counter for Ever After, then it is a reasonable thing that can happen in this game.
And here's the second copy of Torrential Gearhulk that Ward has sided in.
Yep, finds a Hieroglyphic Illumination to cast.
The rate at which Dan is able to cycle through his deck, too, is just kind of absurd. He must see so much of it throughout the course of the match.
Looks like he's looking to cast that Approach the Second Sun. There it is.
There we go.
Does he have a counter? I think if Fanchen has no counter here, then Dan has to assume that he just doesn't have counters.
Oh, wow. I didn't know we had the technology. Approach of the Second Sun has been cast.
Oh, nice.
Up there in the right-hand corner of your screen.
Very nice.
I love that. Gearhulk comes in, will be chump blocked there by a zombie. And yeah, Yang does have Scry off that Oath of Jace because of the Liliana sitting out there, but I wonder, look at that. Look at his graveyard.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in that graveyard. There's probably not very much deck left in there at all.
No.
He probably needs to be careful with taking up Liliana.
But up she goes, and down go two Dream Stealers.
Whoa. Dream Stealer.
Dream Stealer.
That's the perfect mill.
Whenever Dream Stealer deals combat damage to a player, that player discards that many cards. Eternalize for 6.
It looks like he's going after Champion of Wits here. Draw more cards.
I mean, why not?
Make that deck smaller and smaller.
Got to get to the good stuff, Melissa.
He already has the good stuff. His hand is gas.
I was just like, how terrified are you that next turn Ward is going to be able to cast that second Approach of the Second Sun?
I would be pretty terrified.
All right, we have an update from our B table. Paul Dean versus Cody Weber. Dean was on green-white ramp. Weber was on red-blue control.
Draft 47.
And Paul Dean wins in 2.
Your event is ready to begin. Please come to the blue gallery.
So Dan just fumigated, so the board is clear once again. But Fanchen does have a stocked graveyard, so we might see an Eternalized Dreamstealer here. We might see an Ever After.
11 a.m. Frontier Challenge.
I mean, Dan Ward's still on 12. Ooh,
Or we
Razaketh.
see a Razaketh.
Razaketh, the foul-blooded 8/8 Flampler coming down.
Razaketh and Liliana go hand in hand.
Oh, yes, they do. Although Liliana would probably rather that they didn't.
Oh, for sure. For
She's
sure.
over that.
Well, those zombies are good demonic tutors.
Yeah, absolutely. Pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a card, put that card in your hand. Yeah.
And looks like
Looks
that's
like
what he's
it's-
going to do.
Woohoo! What does he have left to find?
Not a whole lot. That deck is tiny. What could he find here?
What does he want
sideboard
to
cards?
get him out of the situation where he's just like got to be so nervous that another approach is coming from Ward, who has the ability just to draw cards, and he's already drawn a fair amount after putting that Approach to the Second Sun 7 down.
What he really wants is a way to get rid of Approach the Second Sun forever. He only had 1 copy of Pick the Brain.
Okay.
Lost Legacy.
Ooh. Well, he just drew a Never to Return.
Did we see the card he tutored up?
I did not.
So that looks like the Scarab God.
Does he have Lost Legacy in his sideboard?
He has
Yeah,
1
he
copy of
does.
Lost Legacy.
Huh. Scarab God, a card we have seen brought in some zombies builds. in the 5-drop slot.
This card must be dealt with because for 4 mana, you can just eternalize all of your stuff. Okay, so it looks like Liliana decided to reanimate Razaketh.
Glimmer of genius here from Ward.
My guess he's going to go bottom, find approach of the second sun.
Oh boy, we've got to be close. I couldn't see.
Yeah, I couldn't see either. I'm not sure how close we are, but we've got to be close. Like a couple turns
he's drawn so
have
many
gone
cards.
by.
There it is.
Yep, okay. So now the question is, do you play around counter magic or not?
I mean, Yang just tutored.
He did just tutor. He can also tutor in response and find the counter. But looking at his list,
There's none.
I don't see any counters. So I think that's going to just be game if he goes for it. It is a risky play for Dan to just go for it, though. He has to assume that Fanchen has counters in his deck.
That's so
Especially,
funny.
even if he only has like a 1 or 2 of negate, he has the ability to tutor.
Right. You just asked him how many cards he has in his hand.
The answer is 1 million.
All right.
What
Is
do
he
you
gonna
do with your
it?
Dan?
I don't know. He hasn't seen a single counter spell, though, from Yang. Oh,
Yeah,
he's going to
he
fumigate.
just went for the safe play of Fumigate.
And if you're Dan, are you thinking, well, we'll just try and wipe this board clean. He's not going to waste his counter on this.
Yeah, I think Dan is trying to find a backup approach to the second sun. He does have another copy in his deck. He probably has a lot of ways to clear the board, so he's just going to go for it when Fanchen is tapped out or something.
Dan shoots back up to 18 life.
So in response to Fumigate, Fanchen just sacked his Scarab God, which is going to come back at end of turn anyway, to tutor. So now his hand is even more gas.
But I don't feel like I even see a Lost Legacy in it. No, I don't.
Maybe he didn't side it in.
There comes back the Scarab God. Yeah, he's just got everything you could ever want except a way to deal with a second approach to the second sun.
But Dan doesn't know that.
No. But we do.
Oh, yeah, we know that as soon as Dan casts this approach with the second sun, the game will be over. But Dan doesn't know that. And Fanchen can very easily rebuild here, play Scarab God, and now for every 4 mana, he could just make a 4/4 token.
Just keeps
Also,
reanimating.
more Razakeths.
Yeah.
Just get that thing back in there. Razakeths forever.
Yeah, Dan's just going to glimmer again here. And there it is.
There's the other approach.
3 copies of Approach to the Second Sun in Dan Ward's deck. Not 4. Just 3.
You
That's all
don't need
need
4. I mean, you really only need 1. Because
Yeah.
you'll draw the other one again, but you might as well have some safeguards.
I'm so happy we get to see an approach deck doing well in a tournament. I remember at Nashville, Pro Tour Nashville, a few months ago, we were all really hoping that an approach deck would do well, but it just wasn't the time for it.
Yeah, no, unfortunately it wasn't. There was too many other combos going on. But now
Now Dan
is the
goes
time.
for it for sure, right?
So Dan's hand is 2 approaches at this point, so I think he has to go for 1. Assume it's going to get countered. We know it's not going to get countered. But no, he decides to cast out. What do you think he casts out here? Okay.
Oh, Scarab God.
So did Dan play a land? If Dan did not play a land, this is a very risky play from Fanchen by getting an internalized creature here. Because now he's tapped out. And Dan can just go land approach.
No lands in hand for Dan.
Yep. So with no lands in hand, and maybe he already played a land, I'm not really sure if he did, but if he did play a land, then this is a very safe play.
Chaos Craft 42, we're still missing some players.
So Ishkanaz is going to enter play for Yang here, bringing along her nest of spider babies, but the writing is on the wall.
It's only sort of on the wall because Dan is very clearly playing around a counter. So Fanchen can swing for 14 here.
Wow.
And with 4 spiders in play, he can activate it for 4, which is just like 1 point shy of killing Dan.
This is crazy. Yeah, in comes the team. Ishkana 3 spiders and our demon. Dan adding up the damage.
Oh, actually, Ishkana is eternalized, right? Which means it's a 4-4, not a 3-5.
Yes, you're right.
So 8, 12, 15, and then the 4 spiders should be game, right?
No way.
But, yeah, like, so I think there might be a mistake going on here because since the spider is not represented with a token, it just looks like a 3-5, even though it's supposed to be a 4-4. So the life total update has Dan at 5, but I'm pretty sure he should be at 4. It's possible the players know what's going on, and Dan actually is at 4, and the life totals are just not correct. We'll see.
So it was for sure eternalized, do you think?
I'm pretty sure it was eternalized.
All right, here's a judge.
We still need that one more person for Frontier. Come on up. Don't forget you can play Frontier with a standard deck.
It looks like judges are straightening things out. Yep, okay, eternalized. Sure. So now we know it's a 4-4.
Good, don't it? Come on up to the registration desk and we'll fill that event out and we can launch it.
Yeah, and that is just 15 damage alone without the spider activation.
And then there's a spider activation for 4, it looks like. Yeah, it looks like that's a spider activation for 4.
Blessed Alliance.
Blessed Alliance. To gain 4 life?
Oh my god.
Whoa. Oh, that's huge.
Oh. No way. Yang was like, I think I have it, bluffing this counterspell the whole time.
This is crazy. So Dan goes up to 8 and then down to 4. And then next turn, he just has to cast Approach of the Second Sun.
Gonna do some cycling, though.
Yeah, I think Dan is looking for some kind of counter backup, like a Supreme Will. But you have to go for it because he's very close to dead, right? Unless he has Fumigate, and he just wants to play super safe and just wait until he has Supreme Will back up. I think you have to go for it
Oh,
here.
I think you do
really hope
too.
he goes for it. Just do it. Tap 7, slam this thing down. Oh my god.
The slow rolls. Glimmer of genius here.
I mean, I do get where he's coming from. It's not that slow of a roll. He's playing very cautiously.
Yes.
He really wants to find that Supreme Will. All right,
Finish
did
him.
it. Slam that thing down.
There's
Oh,
the
wow.
handshake.
What a sigh of relief from Dan.
Wow, playing around the counter spell that never existed.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got to, though. The players coming in, they don't know these decks. They don't know these lists.
Right. Yeah, Dan could literally be playing anything. Fanchen could literally be playing anything. Like, these are not established decks here. They did not come from the Pro Tour. We have not seen anything like this before. So, got to play around everything, especially day 2 of the Grand Prix when both players are 9-1.
And you mentioned this earlier, Melissa, but why would Yang not be running any counter spells in this reanimation deck?
Well, like I was saying earlier, you have to have so many different pieces. You have to have your enablers, so your Oath of Jace, your Champion of Wits, your strategic planning. You have to have your reanimation spells, which is Liliana, Ever After. And then you have to have your fatties, like your Razaketh and your creatures to reanimate, that kind of thing. So he has to have so many things, and since Mono Red just won the Pro Tour, his deck is just tuned to beat that.
And it turns out our spotter on the floor did say that Dan was worried about negate? Well,
Of course.
we'll be back with more action from Grand Prix Minneapolis after these messages.